Welcome to Anti-Fiction. This is a weekly nonfiction podcast where each week I, Christian Yates, select a topic, and then I force two guest hosts to come and talk about stories relating to that topic. My guest host this week, Andy Mattingly, and Mike Yates. I thought you were going to talk into the microphone. That's why I paused.
Oh, no, I was leaning forward because I thought you were going to...
And Mike actually was going to talk into the microphone.
And then you guys rudely interrupted.
I stepped on that.
What are you saying, Mike? What's going on?
I'm just eating.
Oh, okay.
So our topic this week is possessions. This is our fourth Spooktober episode. So we're going to get into some possessions. I did the possession of Clara Germana Cele, which is in South Africa, is where this took place. 1906, St. Michael's Mission in Natal, South Africa.
Possessions around the world.
So Clara Germana Cele was orphaned as an infant, like right after she was born. Parents die. And she came to the mission at the age of 4. So, like, her whole life up to at least age 16 when this story takes place, she lived at this school, this like Catholic school.
That sucks.
Yeah. So right away you can tell that we're really fostering an environment of positivity.
Well, I mean, my story last time was very scientific from a Puritan.
That is true. That is true. And it still ended with the only possible scenario is demonic possession from a scientist.
He genuinely exhausted all scientific possibilities. He's like, well, she's not sick. We checked.
Right. So at the age of 16, Clara Germana Cele made a pact with Satan. And,
as you do.
And this was
when you're 16.
Right, who at the age of 16 didn't call up a crossroads demon?
Only people aged 16.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen enough horror movies. You don't see a lot of grown-ass adults playing with Ouija boards.
Well, now it's Slender Man.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So that was later said to be the cause of her demonic possession, was making this pact with the devil.
I mean, if you're going to be possessed, that's probably what'll do it.
Yeah.
Because that was probably part of the deal, I assume.
Yeah.
Right, like, I'm going to
okay,
possess
so part of this
you.
pact, I'm going to possess you. It was like,
Right.
okay, thanks, Satan.
Oh, you're fine. Thanks, Satan.
So Clara revealed her pact to her confessor, Father Horner Erasmus, although she never explained what she wanted to obtain in exchange from the pact. So it's possible, I guess, that she didn't get anything out of this at all, and Satan was just like, hey, make a deal with me to possess you. And she's like, what do I get out of it? And he's like, a demon in your body.
Specifically me.
Specifically me. I just...
Me in your body.
Listen, I've been alive for thousands of years. I just want to know how to live as a 16-year-old South African girl. I haven't had the experience. This is the only experience I've got left, please. So the confession, though, was just kind of like brushed aside and forgotten about by Father Erasmus.
What?
Right?
That's the one you should pay attention
Right.
to.
She's like, I made a pact with the devil, and he goes, all right, back to class.
Oh
like,
my God.
Fine. I made some random unnamed demon number 48. Okay,
Yeah.
there's the problem.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But so after that, though, her behavior started to grow erratic.
Imagine
that. Right? Who would have figured?
Because entering a pact with Satan is not erratic behavior.
So on August 20th, 1906, the sisters at the school witnessed Clara tearing at her clothes, growling like an animal, and engaging in conversation with seemingly invisible beings.
Again, who didn't at 16, you know?
And yeah, but at the same time, I feel like it's a red flag.
I did that.
I mean, it's a
taking,
stretch,
I mean,
but...
taking the clothes off part's kind of the weird part, I think. I
Right.
did it with fully clothed,
Fully
but I
clothed.
did make animal sounds at night.
Yeah, that yeah. Who didn't?
God,
So
I wish I'd grown up with you guys. I know you were fucking weird. I know you were.
That was not a true story. By the way.
That goes against the point of the podcast, Mike.
You can't lie on anti-fiction.
I'm not the one telling the story right now.
That's fair. So at one point, she is reported to have said, "Sister, please call Father Erasmus. I must confess and tell everything, but quick, or Satan will kill me. He has me in his power. Nothing blessed is with me. I have thrown away all the medals you gave me." I don't know what that fucking means.
Oh, that's like that's in my story too.
Oh,
I don't want to talk about it though because it'll ruin my story.
Okay,
Keep going.
that's fair. And later she said, "You have betrayed me. You have promised me days of glory, but now you treat me cruelly."
So he did promise her something.
Yeah. I guess he had to have, but
I feel like it would be against the better interests of a demon to inflict bodily harm on said possessed subject. Because that's like your vessel kind of thing.
Well, I mean,
it's like throwing up in your car just because.
Just like that.
Yep, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, it's your car. It's your car. This is how you get from place to place, and you're
Yeah.
actively destroying the inside of it.
yeah.
He's right.
I would say, am I wrong?
I don't
Point out where
agree
I
with
was
him,
wrong.
but I don't have anything to back up why I don't. So he's right, I guess.
I don't know. I don't think that's how it works, but I don't know enough about demonic possessions to refute it,
Right.
so.
So some of the other crazy shit that Clara got up to.
How about this? It's like keying your own car.
Okay.
Is that better?
That's a better analogy.
Is that a better analogy?
Yeah.
Analogy, whichever word.
No, keep going.
I've been up for a long time.
Clara was said to be able to speak languages of which she had no previous knowledge. The accounts of several nuns state that she understood Polish, German, French, and all other languages which she had never been exposed to.
All of them.
Just all of them.
There's so many languages.
Well, listen,
yeah.
if she wasn't
How'd they
speaking
know?
English or Afrikaans, like,
They're like, listen.
they were
here.
like, "Oh my God, she's speaking Polish over here." Like, that's the only other language
That exists.
Yeah,
in the world.
it's English, Afrikaans, and Polish. I think everybody. I
It's
think
not Dutch. I thought was the Dutch not
Polish was just
South
one that they mentioned specifically. I don't know.
I don't know.
Clara demonstrated clairvoyance by revealing the most intimate secrets and transgressions of people with whom she had no contact. So she was just
Ooh.
There you
right.
go. There's the,
Right.
There's the,
So she's
Yeah.
just kicking it, and like, this person over here has this dirty secret, and like, here's what they lied about today.
If I
And-
was gonna make a
What?
pact with the devil, that's what I'd want to be able
what
to
a
do.
fucking gossip.
I'm already doing that shit.
couldn't keep her fucking mouth shut. Satan is like,
Keep
I
your
told you all of this in
nose
In
out of
confidence.
everyone
confidence.
else's business, but no.
Satan's like, I thought I could trust you.
Her skin would burn when sprinkled with holy water. That's a pretty decent sign.
So what if it was actually battery acid?
Right? Yeah. Oh God, we got the hydrochloric shit.
Shit, I knew something went wrong.
Clara could not bear crosses or other sacred objects, and she would lash out violently when they were in her presence, even if they were concealed. So, like, if somebody came in and, like, had a cross behind their back, she would fucking know that the cross was behind their back, and she'd flip her shit. But then, meanwhile, if somebody had, like, a pencil or whatever, like, probably that didn't do anything. That's
A pencil.
yeah,
Sorry.
you know, a non-holy pencil.
Yeah, all right,
Yeah.
yeah. As opposed to those holy AF pencils.
Well, yeah, you know, like the Pope's pencil, I'm sure, is blessed. She seemed imbued with extraordinary strength and ferocity, easily overpowering authority figures when they tried to restrain her, and often hurling nuns about the convent rooms and beating them up.
Oh my god. Listen,
Right.
I know
that's
that
not
must
what
have
it
been.
meant, but I have the mental image of like literally picking up a nun and throwing
Chucking
it.
her.
in.
Yeah, that's what
Oh
this
my
article that
God.
I read said.
I just,
is,
like,
she was hurling
That must have
nuns
been
across
horrifying for them. How fucking funny is
rooms. Right, this 16-year-old girl's kicking our ass.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Someone needs to hit.
I
the
don't
weight
know.
room.
Maybe it was a demon, you know? I don't know.
right. Who knows?
Maybe she was just already an MMA fighter. Like, what
Right.
if that's what it was? Maybe she just knew
That
how to
was
fight.
very
Did
popular.
anyone think about that? That she just knew how to fight already?
It was popular in 1906 in South Africa to be an MMA fighter.
That sounds
It's-
exactly like someone, like
Yeah.
the way someone would like excuse or justify something. Is like, man, a 16-year-old kicked my ass. No one's gonna let me live this down. She was possessed.
She was
There.
possessed.
That's
Yep.
it. She was possessed. That's why she did it.
100%.
If she hadn't been possessed, it would have been much more fair to fight.
So the sounds that Clara would make were reported to have a savage, bestial sound, and an attending nun wrote, "No animal had ever made such sounds, neither the lions of East Africa nor the angry bulls. At times it sounded like a veritable herd of wild beasts orchestrated by Satan had formed a hellish choir," which is poetic as fuck.
Yeah, that's beautiful, honestly.
So she's speaking all these languages, but also sounds like a pack of wild
Every
animals.
language.
Yes.
Wolf language.
All of it, yeah. She was
Lion language.
wolfkin and cougarkin and all of that. She was also said to have levitated 5 feet in the air on a regular basis, sometimes vertically and sometimes horizontally, and her clothes stuck to her body as if they, too, had managed to defy gravity. Only when sprinkled with holy water was Clara reported to have come down from the air and temporarily snap out of her possessed state.
What?
Yeah. The most ridiculous of all of the claims were that she had the ability to transform into a sort of snake-like creature, her body becoming as flexible as rubber, and slithered across the floor. At one point, she was said to have bitten a nun on the arm and left puncture marks like those of a serpent's fangs.
All right, I officially don't. I officially don't believe any of these claims now.
Right,
that was too much.
That one's over the top. That one's pretty ridiculous.
I think they're lying about everything else too now.
Also, it turns out all she needed was about Tree Fitty.
Oh my god.
So at this point, after all of these things have happened, all of this has already gone on, and now it's determined that Clara has met the criteria for demonic possession and an exorcism was in order. So on September 11th, 1906, almost a full month after she started displaying these symptoms, 2 Roman Catholic priests, Reverend Mansuetti, the director of St. Michael's Mission.
Mansuetti.
Listen, I didn't make this.
Reverend.
And her confessor, Father Erasmus, they were appointed to perform the exorcism. The exorcism itself lasted for 2 days, and during the exorcism, Clara knocked the Bible from one of the priest's hands and grabbed his stole in an attempt to choke him with it. At the end of the second day, the possessing demon supposedly departed Clara's body after telling the priest he would signal his exit by an act of levitation, which occurred in front of an audience of 170 people in the mission chapel. So this was like an event.
Yeah.
Like the
I was
whole...
gonna say, this sounds like a sideshow.
Poor woman.
Everybody turned up for this. Like, see the amazing priests, right? Witness the exorcism of Clara. So
This
the
sounds like a
demon...
Doctor Who episode.
Right, it does. The demon leaves her body, and after this, the priests asserted that the demon was forced out and that Clara was healed and cleared of the devil's influence. So, happy ending.
Oh,
Except
she lived?
for
Oh, okay.
in January of 1907, so what, 4 months later, something like that, Clara claimed to have made another pact with the devil.
Fuck, Clara.
And
He's not your friend.
another exorcism
It's
was
like when your
reportedly-
fucking friend is like, he was so mean to me. Like, well, he yelled at me all the time. And then
Right.
like,
Friend.
so
goes
then you
back
hate
to
him
their
for
shitty
her.
boyfriend.
Yeah, then she's like, no, well, we got back together.
He's not so bad.
Is a friend of mine.
So they did another
So
exorcism,
the
which
slightly
lasted.
lesser known song is really just Jesus is a friend of mine, but in a minor key.
So they did another 2-day exorcism and drove the demon back from her body. Apparently, it was the same one from what the reports.
Well,
I
at least
knew
it
it.
wasn't one of
Right.
40
Right? Yeah, that is
Like,
true. Like the other one.
like
yeah.
last time.
But yeah, and then witnesses reported that the air had become filled with an overpoweringly foul smell. But there's literally no mention of Clara anywhere after that. But she survived that one also. But
Wow.
there's no reports of
Fuck
her
Clara.
for
I'm so
any of
mad
the
at
rest
you.
of her life. But that's the story of Clara Germana Cele.
Well, I'm glad that she was okay in the end.
At least she didn't make a
Yeah,
third
she-
pact with the devil.
You know, yeah, sometimes it
But
takes
third
you a
time's the
couple.
charm, man. Maybe if she'd have gone for that third time,
That
she would
is
have
fair.
actually gotten what she wanted.
That is fair. Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes a little more time to get away. I mean, men, am I right?
Hey, well, Andy,
What up?
what story have you brought for us today?
Okay, so I'm gonna talk to y'all today about Anneliese Michel,
Say about
Who?
Jesus.
my Lord
Oh,
and
our
Savior, Iron Man. Okay. So Anneliese Michel. So this is a story, actually, I guess I should say, that inspired the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Okay.
Which I have never seen. So
I have also never seen it.
I don't know. how
I've
close
seen
it is.
very
it is
few
one of,
exorcism
like,
films.
A handful of those exorcism of insert person here movies that actually wasn't garbage.
Yeah.
From what I understand. I haven't watched it either.
Yeah, and
Well,
I know, and I feel like I've seen a lot of exorcism movies. I'm like really
Right.
interested in
I saw The
scary
Conjuring.
movies like
Yeah, I
this.
saw that one.
Yeah, we watched The Conjuring. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. So, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to get into it. So, Anneliese was born in Germany in 1952. She was the second of 5 children, but her older sister Martha died when she was 8. So Anneliese was she was the second. So it was her, Martha, and then 3 more. I didn't write down their names, but
They're unimportant.
I mean, they're not. I had to leave some stuff out of the story. It's very detailed. So it's been said that while the younger 3 were extremely healthy, Anneliese's immune system could not hold up to most illnesses. So while she was a kid, she caught the measles, and then had the mumps and also scarlet fever, all before the age of 5.
Shit.
Yeah.
What
she
an
got it out of the way
eventful
early, at least.
toddlerhood. Jesus.
At least she got it out of the way early when she would probably not remember it.
Yeah, but she hasn't had the
Right.
chicken pox yet. You didn't list that one, so
Yeah,
she hasn't
well.
had that shit yet.
Oh, she's fucked. Never mind. She
survived
survived all of that to get killed by chicken pox.
Yeah, right. In the end. So this is a little bit funny. I wrote the wrong word here. So I wrote she was much younger than her peers. I meant smaller. But I wrote she was much younger than her peers until she was 13. Like she just went from 5 to 13.
Yeah. All of a sudden, once she turned 13, everyone else that was her age got younger.
Right. Sorry. Okay. So she was much smaller than her peers until she was about 13 years old, at which point she finally caught up to them. And at that point, a lot of the bullying from her younger years stopped. So until then, she was like the smallest and the weakest. And so she was very regularly bullied. But that pretty much went away when she was 13. After that, she was pretty normal, had friends. She had a really close friend, Maria, who comes up a lot. So that was pretty much smooth sailing until September of 1968.
Oh, boy.
So she's 16 at this point.
Yeah.
And without any warning, Anneliese has her first seizure at school. She blacks out momentarily in class, and her friend Maria shakes her because she thinks she's sleeping. And so Anneliese kind of comes back to consciousness and brushes it off and is like, oh, I must have stayed up too late studying last night. And
Yep.
then they laugh because
Whatever
no,
your
she
kids
wasn't.
in 1968 did
Yeah.
for fun. Sure. Nerd.
But then that night, Anneliese experiences something that sounds like sleep paralysis
Okay.
to me. She said it felt like a
I think we
force.
talked about that on another episode,
We did,
too.
yeah. She said it felt like a force was holding her down, and her eyes were open, and she could see around her, but she couldn't call out for help, and she couldn't move at all. When she never really came out of it, she just fell back asleep. If that makes
Okay.
sense. So the next day, she told her mom that she was sick, and kind of explained what happened to her. So she stayed home from school that day, because she was just like exhausted from the night before. And then at that
Hungover?
point,
No.
yeah. But then she was fine for nearly a year after that, until it happened again. So she briefly blacked out during the day and then had this paralysis at night. Since this was the second time, her mom was like really concerned. So she takes her to the doctor, and the doctor like refers to them to a neurologist. At this point, her mom starts like freaking out because she's afraid that people are going to find out that Anneliese has to go see a neurologist. And she's like, they're going to think that you're crazy. They're going to like look down on you. At this point, Anneliese is like very bright. She's very smart. She really enjoys learning, and her like dream for her life is to become a school teacher in like a little town and just teach kids. And that's what she wants to do, like
Can't
with her
do
life.
that if everybody thinks you're nuts.
Right, exactly. So her mom's really worried about that. But the neurologist ran several tests and concluded that everything was normal and that there was nothing physically wrong with her brain.
But like in 1968, a neurologist, what do they do? Like, can you read
They did, like, an
this? And like,
ECG.
here's a Rubik's cube.
No, there was stuff
They
that they
prescribe
did.
you cocaine for that.
I mean, I'm sure some of that was it too, but I don't know. I wasn't a neurologist in 1968, so.
That's fair.
Would have been great. You just say it's brain demons. Here's some cocaine for it.
I was born in the wrong era. Okay, so he did say though that she likely had suffered from seizures both times.
Okay.
What those blackouts were, but whether or not he treated them with medication is difficult to prove because there's a letter that he wrote in which he says that he prescribed her an anticonvulsant that she was supposed to take, but then later on at the eventual trial, he testified that he did not prescribe her any medication and that his letter was untrue. So,
Like,
I don't know.
He claimed that he had written an untrue letter.
Yes. Yeah. He basically was like, yeah, I wrote that, but I didn't mean it. Like he was lying. I don't know.
Backsies.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's unclear about whether or not at that point she was prescribed any medication. So after this incident, though, Anneliese started getting sick again. She complained of a sore throat for a long time before her tonsils were finally removed. She then came down with pneumonia and pleurisy, which were complicated by an infection brought on by tuberculosis. So she had to drop out of school.
Is she gonna have
So
every
many
disease? Is the demon that she's possessed by pestilence? Is the
Listen, I will tell you what demons that she was possessed by, but we haven't gotten it yet.
okay, all right.
Right. So she drops out of school, obviously. And at the beginning of 1970, so like in January of 1970, she's transferred to a hospital for more specialized care. So between the end of 1969 and 1970, she kind of was at home, and then she was like back and forth to the doctor until eventually she was put into a hospital. So in June of 1970, she has her third attack at the hospital, which at that point, they transfer her to a new doctor in a sanitarium, where she is definitively, for the first time, prescribed anticonvulsants for her seizures. So during this time, she started experimenting with prayer. I really can't remember if I said this already, but her family was very solidly Catholic. So she had grown up knowing, Catholicism very well.
Sure.
So she was like active in her religion and really enjoyed it. So during this time, while she's experimenting with prayer, what she was trying to do was to pray like harder and deeper than she had before, because she had one experience where she was praying with all the girls in her sanitarium, and she just had this feeling that she said rushed over her of just like relief and what she called sweetness, and she felt very firmly that she was in the presence of the Mother of God, of the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
And that she had like direct communication with the Virgin Mary that day. After she had that first experience, though, another person in the ward approached her and asked her if she was okay. And when she kind of questioned them further, they explained that while they were doing the prayer that day where she experienced that relief and sweetness, her eyes turned black and her hands began scratching themselves. But Anneliese didn't believe her because she didn't experience that. That is not what she felt like was going on.
Okay.
Yeah. So a few weeks.
Did the article you read say what she thought was happening?
She thought she was talking
just kicking it
to the Virgin Mary. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So a few weeks later, she decides to try again to get that feeling and that relief and to get that communication. And while she's praying by herself outside, trying to sort of communicate with Mother God again.
Mm-hmm.
And she blinks and sees what she calls a cruel smiling face in the sky. And it was staring at her. And she was so afraid that she quit praying for a time because she didn't want it to come back. So over the next 6 weeks, she would sometimes say the rosary, but not with any conviction whatsoever because she was too afraid to really pray. But eventually, she decides that the face she saw was not like some evil outsider trying to stop her from communicating. It was actually something inside of her. So that's when she first decides that she has some evil spirit inside of her. But in August of 1970, she ends up going home because all of her medical procedures are coming back normal time and time again, and she didn't have another attack since June. That was the last one she had, and they were like, "You're fine," so they send her home. So she goes back to school, but at this point she's upset because she's 2 years behind her class. So she's only been gone 1 year, but since she was so sick when she was younger, they held her back a year. So now she's 2 years behind her friends that she had been going to school with. So her friend Maria would later say that Anneliese came back, quote, withdrawn and mostly interested in religious conversations. Shortly after the school year started, Anneliese had to go see a lung specialist because of the pneumonia and tuberculosis and pleurisy.
Shit.
Yeah. But he, going through her medical records, was mostly interested in her seizures. And so he got in contact with her family physician to get him to look into it further. But nothing else was done because he was like, we've already taken care of this. She hasn't had an attack recently. But to be safe, they prescribed her another anticonvulsant because she stopped taking them. It was mentioned, though, that it was unlikely that she took them for long if she ever took them consistently at this point, because she didn't like how they made her feel. And so this is pretty much at the point where Anneliese falls into a very deep depression. She says about the time between 1970 and 1972, I was able to perceive but not to experience. So she was just very apathetic. She was going through school. She was getting, it said at best, average grades, whereas before she loved school and got very good grades and wanted to be a teacher. And now she was just sort of going through the motions to make her parents feel better about her being held back and all that. So at the end of 1972, though, she has her worst seizure to date. It takes her 4 days to recover. And the 5th day, she's like not able to move much, but she's at least able to get up and move around. Her mother takes her to a neurologist again, who puts her on an anticonvulsant for the 3rd time. And she follows up with him 4 times into the spring of 1973. But at these follow-ups, it seems unlikely that she talked to him about the side effects she was experiencing with the medication because none of them were reported. So the side effects she does bring up later. She describes them as having periods of stills in her brains where she feels like her brain just stops working. And she also is plagued by what she called a horrible stench that others did not smell. And then later in the spring, Anneliese began hearing sounds that other people could not hear.
So this is like a wait and biding his time kind of demon,
right?
Or it's just mental illness.
Yeah, almost definitely. The church has at this point changed its mind about the exorcism and said that she was not possessed.
Right.
She was mentally ill. And so this story is actually a really big one that people bring up when they talk about how mental illness is treated, because at this point it's pretty widely considered that she either had schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah.
But because that was just not something that they checked for or knew about at that point, it
just kind of went mostly untreated.
Exactly. And I think that from what I understand, the fact that she was having those seizures was sort of like a red herring, that she also had epilepsy, but then on top of that had some kind of mental illness, but they were attributing all of it to her epilepsy, if that makes sense.
She literally had every conceivable illness that you could possibly have.
Yeah.
Like physically, like
there wasn't. I mean, not lupus, but
it's never lupus.
It's never lupus. Like
that is
basically
true.
everything else.
Yeah.
It's lupus like one
pox.
time and then never again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not chicken pox. She's gonna have a hell of a time with it as an adult.
Poor kid.
Oh no, that face. Okay. All right. Well, spoilers, audience.
So Anneliese begins hearing these noises. So basically what's happening when her mother talks about when Anneliese first brings up the noises that she's hearing, because also it's important to know that this is not like widely known what's going on with her, but she does talk to her mom about what's going on. So her mom knows, but is really conflicted about everything, about what can be wrong with her. And so Anneliese tells her that the night before she heard these knockings in her bedroom.
Okay.
And her mother was like, okay, well, I mean, they weren't there, so you were dreaming or something. And she was like, no, I definitely wasn't asleep. And her mom just kind of placates her and is like, okay, well, it could have been anything. But that continues for some time.
Jesus.
Yeah. So her mother at this point is extremely upset because Anneliese has told her about the devil faces and about the smells and the sounds and about her feelings with prayer. And she, at this point, once she learns of like her hearing things, decides that something supernatural is wrong with her. And so she tells her husband this story that I'm going to read as a direct quote from a book that I will cite at the end because I forgot what it was called. She says, "Believe me, something terrible, something supernatural is going on. You know that statue of the Virgin on the mantle in the living room downstairs? Well, the other day I happened to walk through there and saw Anneliese looking at the Mother of God. Only it wasn't with respect or adoration. Her face was like a terrible mask full of hatred. Her eyes turned black, jet black, and her slender hands, you know how delicate her hands are, well, they twitched and seemed to turn into thick paws with claws. I tell you it was awful, and I was so scared I rushed up to the office and tried to calm myself by writing out some bills. Only I couldn't. My hands shook so I couldn't hold a pen, and I could not see the typewriter." So
That's how I calm down, is pay bills.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I was honestly, when I read that, I was like, maybe write bills means something that I don't know because there's no way.
Unless she's billing other people.
Right.
Yeah. Like maybe they owned some property and she
Yeah.
was like, the Smiths haven't paid us yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gonna have to repossess their dog.
Yeah. So.
Man, don't talk about repossessing. Their daughter's possessed.
Oh yeah, that's poor taste,
I'm
Michael.
sure the irony would not be lost on him.
Yeah. So her mother at this point is like very afraid, and
Yeah,
is also
naturally.
certain that it's demonic possession. So, in an effort to raise his daughter's spirits.
Hey.
I know. As I was reading that, I was like, is that really what I wrote? Annaliese's father took her to San Damiano. I don't think I said that right. But
that
it's
sounds right to me.
it's a church in Italy. So this cheered her up immensely. As her father had gone before and spoken of it, and she was very excited to go see it with her. So they took a trip with a few other people from their church. So Father Alt, who will come up later, is part of her exorcism process, conveys this story during the trial. Now, Anneliese told me, and Frau Hein confirmed this, that she was unable to enter the shrine. She approached it with the greatest hesitation, then said that the soil burned like fire, and she simply could not stand it. She then walked around the shrine in a wide arc, the shrine in a wide arc, and tried to approach it from the back. She looked at the people who were kneeling in the area surrounding the little garden, and it seemed to her that while praying they were gnashing their teeth. She got as far as the edge of the little garden, then she had to turn back. Coming from the front again, she had to avert her glance from the pictures of Christ. She made it several times to the garden, but could not get past it. She also noted that she could no longer look at medals or pictures of saints. They sparkled so intensely that she could not stand it.
So that's where the medals come in.
Yeah, so it's like I guess a blessed religious item.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
It's
So
+2 versus possessions.
Yeah. It's really helpful with your buff from being a paladin.
It's only attunable by a paladin.
Yeah, there you go.
so I don't even know what you're talking about.
D&D.
Oh, okay.
It
So
always comes back to D&D.
Yeah.
Anyways, keep going.
on the way home, Anneliese lamented that people were talking about her while they were at the church. So as she was walking around trying to get closer but unable to, people stopped praying and worshiping to whisper about her as she was walking around. On the way back from the church, Father Alt says that her complete demeanor changed, that she attacked one of the sisters with them and was talking in like a low, gruff voice, trying to make fun of one of the nuns. And then
that just
when
how
she-
nuns talk.
right.
Like they're possessed by demons.
Yeah. And
Did you say your rosary? You never take me anywhere nice.
and so when she described the experience later, she kept repeating the phrase, "My will is not my own." So after this, Anneliese became very insistent that her issues were not medical, but the result of demonic possession. So now she's being kind of aggressive about it. She wants an exorcism at this point. She asked the church at the end of 1973, but she was denied. Her family was told that there were several requirements needed to get an exorcism, and you have to meet all of them.
You have to levitate. You have to speak every language.
Then you have to fill out this form, take it to this, take it to this papistry. They have to.
It's got to be
sign
notarized
it
by
has
the
to be,
Pope.
It has to be notarized. You have to take it all the way to the Vatican. The Vatican has to then approve it, which there's a 2-week waiting period.
I'm getting bored hearing you describe this.
No. I'm sorry. This
I'm
is
sorry.
The
Are we
blue.
taking all like the pizzazz out of demonic possession?
This is
and
the
exorcism?
blue
Yes.
form. You should have gotten the pink form.
You should have gotten the puce form.
You guys are stressing me out.
The puce form is then supposed to be filed directly to your local.
This is like that scene in the Hitchhiker's
your
Guide
local
to the
church,
Galaxy.
who then has to put out a requisition to the convent, and then yeah.
Michael was very happy with that joke.
It was a good one. Hall
But
of
I had to
Fame.
finish my sentence first before I could truly appreciate it.
So at this point, she's 20 years old.
So this has been going on for 4 years now?
Yeah. So the church rejects her and says that she should continue with medication and treatment. So they explain that the criteria, what the criteria is, the requirements that they have to meet. And so the ones that she did have some of them. She did have an aversion to religious objects. But like, who fucking doesn't? And then,
well, if you're very Catholic, probably not you.
yeah, I guess you're right. But she obviously didn't show any supernatural powers or speaking in a language that person has never learned, which are signs of a demonic possession.
She got the lame, non-superpowered demon.
Right. The one that was
without
just, like,
the all speak.
pissed off all the
It's
time.
actually the one with glasses and a pocket protector. He talks to the lisp and has asthma. It's like, man,
This is
the
my
worst.
first possession.
I got a fucking nerd for a demon.
And so throughout this whole process, Anneliese is trying to, like, as best she can, become more religious and more in tune with her faith because she thinks that will save her.
Right.
But she does also, even from the beginning, she mentions it, but slowly over time becomes really firm in the fact that she is suffering the way that Christ did to save souls.
Okay.
And so she wants it to be over, but she does not want, she's afraid to pray for it to end because she wants to suffer the way Christ did. And so she wants to be brave and do this for her religion and for her God.
Right.
But, you know, being possessed by a demon fucking sucks, obviously.
Yeah.
So also she wants it to end soon.
And she just wants to pray the demon away.
Yeah.
She wants to be stronger than it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't help that every time they reject one of her, like, appeals or requests, they recommend that she lives even more of a religious lifestyle to find peace. They're like, just be more religious. Yeah, which is not helping, obviously. At this point, though, she's not getting any better. She's actually getting much worse. She begins insulting, beating, and biting the other members of her family just on a regular basis. She stops eating because the demons tell her that she's not allowed to. She sleeps on the stone floor, and if she does eat, only eats spiders, flies, and coal.
Oh, fuck.
And only drinks her own urine.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. She can be heard screaming throughout the house for hours. And she spends her time breaking crucifixes, destroying their paintings of Jesus, pulling apart rosaries, and self-mutilating.
You know, it doesn't sound like she's getting more religious.
Yeah.
I don't think that's working.
And then it becomes pretty normal to see her tearing her clothes off and urinating on the floor. So pretty much at this point, they decide, like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do the exorcism.
Naturally.
Right. Because that's not regular. And so the two people put in charge are Father Arnold Renz and Pastor Ernst Alt.
From earlier in the story.
Yeah. So they're put in charge of her exorcism, excuse me. So it was then that they had to figure out what demon was inside her. Or should I say which demons? Because the demons inside her were Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and Fleischmann, who is a disgraced Frankish priest from the 16th century, and also other damned souls who had manifested throughout her.
Okay, all right. So hold on. So
Seems a little extreme.
so she's possessed by Hitler
I know. That one was
Judas.
the wildest one to me, too. I was like...
and Emperor friggin' Nero.
Yeah.
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, sure. All right.
Which, as you can imagine, is why she's having a rough time. This is not some
Right.
low-level demon number 48 with a pocket protector.
It's true. It's just, it's lucky that being possessed by Hitler, it's lucky she wasn't Jewish, or this would have been an even harder time for her.
Probably. So,
I thought that was kind of funny.
well, you think a lot of your jokes are funny.
Oh, boo,
Ooh,
roasted.
that was funny.
I mean,
show.
it was all right.
It was funny. So, in September of 1975, they get permission to start the exorcisms. I don't know if I said the date yet. I can't remember yet. Back that far, but I want to make it clear now in case I didn't. So she has an exorcism once or twice a week until July 1st, 1976.
So a year?
So from September to July.
Well, okay, yeah, that's fair. So like,
so not a full year,
8
but
months.
once or twice a week. Towards the end, it's mentioned that they were happening daily, but I only saw that once. I didn't see that. I couldn't confirm that for sure. So
Shit.
maybe towards the end it was daily.
So for all that time, they're just exercising, and they're like, gee, why isn't this working?
Yeah. I mean, basically. So sometimes when she was having the exorcisms performed, she would get so strong that she would have to be held down by at least 3 men. And occasionally they actually ended up chaining her up to make her not move. But during the beginning of this, she pretty much returned to normal in her life. She would went to school. She took some final exams. She was going to church pretty regularly.
Just kicking it.
Yeah,
And then,
but once or twice a week.
7
they
o'clock,
performed-
time for my
yeah.
exorcism.
An exorcism on her. So, her these attacks though that she's having they don't stop at this point. They get much worse. She would find herself blacking out and then being paralyzed much closer together and much more frequently. And so this went on for several months. So they're just continuing to do the exorcisms, and then at this point sometimes other family members would come. They would have visitors, people they didn't know but just found out about her would show up and be part of the exorcism.
Can we get you some tea while you watch the exorcism?
Yeah. The last few months of her life though, Anneliese basically denied all food. She just stopped eating. So the last few months of her life was in a sort of semi-starvation state, because
Okay.
sometimes they would force her to eat, but she would on her own deny food. So she did not willingly eat food for the last few months of her life. Her knees were completely ruptured because she obsessively performed genuflections, which I didn't know what that was either. I had to look it up. It's when you kneel in prayer. She did that over 600 times and obsessive during exorcisms daily, to the point where she ruptured both of her knees.
Shit.
Yeah, towards the end of her life, she was actually unable to do them anymore, so her parents would hold her up so she could do them.
All right. I would think at that point just be just don't kneel for prayer now.
I just feel like we need to take it one step further and stop performing exorcisms.
Well, yeah, that also could be fair. Yeah.
So over 40 audio tapes recorded the process in order to preserve the details. So those exist. The last day.
Did you listen to any of them? Are they
No.
available to listen to on YouTube or anything like that?
I probably not YouTube. You can probably find them. I don't know.
Listen, they're out there, listeners.
Somewhere.
The truth is out there.
I wouldn't want to listen to them. I mean, it's very easy to find pictures of it,
Right.
so I can't imagine it'd be too difficult to find some audio
Sure.
at least, especially if it was played during the trial or anything. So the last day of her exorcisms was on June 30th, 1976. At this point, she was suffering from pneumonia. She was completely malnourished. She was running a fever. She was definitely at this point unable to kneel in prayer, and so her parents had to carry her through the motions. Her last statement to the exorcist was beg for absolution, and the last thing she said to her mother was, "Mother, I'm afraid." Sorry.
Shit.
Give me a second. Oh, this is so sad. She didn't have to die like this. Okay. So her mom recorded her time of death the next day at July 1st, 1976 at noon. And Pastor Alt informed the authorities. So not long before her death, though, Anneliese had actually given a handwritten letter to the exorcist saying that she no longer wanted any more exorcisms and they were not supposed to keep doing them without her approval. In the letter, she explains that she spoke to the Virgin Mary and the Virgin had given her two choices. She could either be freed from the demons immediately, or she could remain possessed for a little while longer to show the world the dangers of demons and their power, and that would save souls. And so Anneliese chose to remain possessed and to stop getting the exorcisms. She was also reportedly told that once she, right before she died, she would be freed of the demons, and that she would die in a state of grace. So I think it was, I could be wrong about this because the timeline's a little iffy, but it was like between a month and 2 weeks before her death, she told them what day she would die. And then she did. So she said that at midnight on July 1st, the demons would be forced to leave her body. And so she died at noon on July 1st. And so for that last 12 hours, she was said to be exhausted but peaceful, and then finally fell asleep and never woke up. Yeah.
Shit.
So today, Anneliese's grave is a place of pilgrimage for many Christians who believe that she experienced these extreme sufferings to deliver people from hell. And her... sorry, hold on just a second. Okay, so yeah. She was, though, exhumed and moved 11 and a half years after her burial. So there are two sites, and both of them are... yeah, places of pilgrimage for Christians who believe that she fought the devil for 4 years. So naturally, Pastor Alt and Father Renz, as well as her parents, were charged with negligent homicide for failing to call a medical doctor because they...
I can't imagine why they would be charged with anything.
So the state prosecutor said that her death could have been prevented as little as 1 week before she died. She had a shot at living. So the trial started in 1978, which, and, you know, naturally drew like a ton of interest. The doctors said that she was not possessed. But Dr. Richard Roth, who was asked for medical help by Father Alt at one point, allegedly said after the exorcism that, quote, "there is no injection against the devil." So the only doctor that was ever allowed to see her believed that she was possessed. The priests were defended by church-paid lawyers, and then her parents claimed that the exorcism was legal, so they couldn't be charged with murder, because the German Constitution protected citizens in the unrestricted exercise of their religious beliefs. So they all basically claimed because she fit all the criteria that they were not guilty, even though she died. So part of the defense said that during the trial they played tapes from the sessions. One of them in particular featured the demons arguing with each other from Anneliese. It's what they used to prove that she was possessed. Both priests believed and continued to believe that she was possessed and that she was freed by exorcisms just before she died. So they believe that they had a hand in freeing her from those exorcisms, even though clearly it was the Virgin Mary. So once again, men taking credit for things that strong women are doing. I got these all day, guys. So ultimately they were found guilty of manslaughter, resulting from negligence. And so they were sentenced to 6 months in prison, which turned into...
6 months?
Which turned into 3 years probation.
They didn't even get not even the 6 months in reality. Jesus.
Yeah. A lot of people were surprised. They thought that was actually a more severe sentence than they were going to get. And it was actually higher than the prosecution demanded, which was they wanted the priests to be fined and the parents to be found not guilty. Or sorry, be found guilty but not punished. So they actually...
They got a harsher sentence than what the
Yeah.
prosecution was actually going. That's fucking ridiculous.
Right.
A kid is dead.
Yeah. Okay, so the book that I got the information from is called The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. And it was written by Felicitas D. Goodman. A good amount of it was available for free online. So I would recommend it, but the middle is taken out. Also, it's only $28, so buy it. I mean, I'm
Right.
definitely going to because I want to know what happened more in
Yeah.
detail in the middle there.
Yeah.
But then I also used this to get those middle bits. I am at this website called unitypublishing.com. And the title is called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, The True Story. And at the top has a picture of Anneliese as a 16-year-old.
Well, that was a harrowing story.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention, obviously, but about her death. The autopsy report stated that the cause was malnutrition and dehydration due to being in a semi-starvation state for almost a year. She weighed 68 pounds.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
How tall was she?
'Cause
that does make a
Too tall
difference.
to weigh 68 pounds.
Mine depends.
Yeah.
Was she 4 foot?
I
I
don't-
feel
I
like
mean, that does
that's-
make a difference. I mean,
she wasn't, though,
There's
because they
plenty of
said
people I
that
know
she
that are-
was...
healthy that weigh 95 pounds.
Yeah, but
Well,
68
sure.
is significantly
Yeah, I
smaller.
know, but like
68 is like a
if
child.
they're shorter than this. Well, she was a child, right? She was a
No,
teenager.
she is 24 when this happened.
Yeah,
Oh.
by,
She was
by the end of it,
24.
she was
Well,
24.
I
Yeah.
heard a kid died.
Well, I mean,
And-
still,
I mean,
like, their
yeah.
kid died.
She is 24 years old when she died.
Yeah, that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
All right, well, that was hard to listen to.
You're
So,
welcome. Most of the
Mike,
stuff.
I hope you've got one of those happy-go-lucky possession stories.
Yeah, because there's a plethora of those.
Yeah, a goofy exorcism.
I'm going
like
to
somebody that makes a pact with the devil twice.
2 separate packs. It's like I wasn't happy with the terms the first time. I'm here to renegotiate. All right, so mine, I'm going to give you the overview and the rundown real quick because there is a little bit of a kind of related but unrelated backstory to it, which
Okay.
helps. And there's some, nice little Easter egg tie-ins, if you want to call it that. And because there's this big chunk of stuff that's really important to the original story, but would only get mentioned very much in passing. So I'm doing the trial of Arne Cheyenne Johnson,
Okay,
also known as the Devil Made Me Do It case.
okay.
The first known court case in the United States in which the defense sought to prove innocence based upon the defendant's claim of demonic possession and denial of personal responsibility for the crime.
But not the last.
But not the last.
Never the last. On November 24th, 1981, in Brookfield, Connecticut, Arne Cheyenne Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter for the killing of his landlord, Alan Bono, which I know this whole time, Christian, you're just going to be thinking of U2, and I find that funnier than...
I was
what's
right
actually
on the
going on.
edge of saying that.
Mm-hmm.
See, because it's funny, because the edge
Yeah,
is
'cause
the
the
name
edge
of the
is
good
the
thing.
name
Yeah,
of it.
anyway, go on.
Don't get too high there on those jokes. You might get some vertigo.
Classic.
All right. So this is the part where backstory is I'm gonna start a backstory. According to testimony by the Glatzel family, 11-year-old David Glatzel had allegedly played host to the demon that forced Johnson to kill Bono. See?
Yeah, there you go.
Should have just sold those fucking sunglasses and actually helped some starving kids in Africa. After witnessing a number of increasingly ominous occurrences involving David, the family, exhausted and terrified, decided to enlist the aid of self-described demonologists, drumroll, Ed and Lorraine Warren,
Oh,
noted for their investigation into the famed
That's from the
Amityville
Conjuring
haunting.
movie.
Yeah, which is what The
Oh.
Conjuring is based off of. I was originally going to do that one, but there is surprisingly little information on the true story it's based on.
yeah.
So instead, I chose this one. I was like, oh, hey, look at that. I got it anyways. In a last-ditch effort to cure David, the Glatzel family, along with the Warrens, then proceeded to have David exorcised by a number of Catholic priests. The process continued for several days, concluding when, according to those present, A demon fled the boy's body and took up residence within Johnson.
Oh,
Several
no.
months later,
That's the
Johnson
biggest
killed
fear.
his landlord during a heated conversation. What's up?
That's the biggest fear, is that you're doing it, and the demon's like, fine, I'll leave, but
Yeah.
I'm coming for you.
Have you ever watched The Devil Inside?
No.
Okay, well,
It
they do this.
sounds like
But
a
that sounds
porno.
They do this
sexy.
bit. Okay, so The Devil Inside was a found footage demonic possession movie made
I have
where
seen it.
yeah, where there's modern day priests doing exorcisms, but also doing their exorcisms based on science. This is why that movie was shitty.
I did see
They
that.
go into huge depth talking
Mhm.
about the phenomena known as transference, which is this, where a demon exits the person being exorcised and enters someone else. And they talk about how, yeah, that's a thing. And then later they're doing an exorcism and it happens. And they're like, oh no, we never knew that could happen. We didn't possibly plan for this. Who would have thought?
Maybe they were referring to some other phenomenon called transference.
So that is why The Devil Inside is shitty, and makers of The Devil Inside, you should be fucking ashamed of yourselves for making such a bad movie. Also, it just ends. The movie just ends.
Yeah.
There's no
well,
actual ending.
technically, all movies just end. Mike.
No, like
Shut
there's
up.
no like literally it's
Except
like,
for the never-ending story.
All right, basically what I mean is if you were watching, say, The Empire Strikes Back, and after Luke gets his hand cut off, the movie just fades to black and it's over.
Oh,
It's like shit's going down right now, and you're like, okay, this is okay. Where are we going from
Well,
here?
this
And
is
then it's just
climax,
over, and then
but
it's just
that's
over,
the end.
and you're like, wait a minute.
go out on a high note.
Nothing. No, it wasn't even a high note because the movie was pretty dumb to begin with. But, anyways, I digress. So anyway,
the demon jumps out of the kid, jumps into the guy,
jumps
and then
into
he kills,
another guy
Yeah,
who then is the
and then he goes and hacks up his landlord.
kind of. Several months later, Johnson killed his landlord during a heated conversation. His defense lawyer argued in court that he was possessed, but the judge ruled that such a defense could never be proven and was therefore infeasible in a court of law. Johnson was subsequently convicted, though he served 5 years of a 10 to 20-year sentence. That's about standard.
Yeah,
That's about normal.
Yeah. sure.
Parole after half of your sentence.
Yeah.
That's about normal.
But he
So-
murdered a guy, and he only got 10 years?
It was manslaughter. We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like I'm very meticulous in this planning and I'm making sure that things are happening a certain way and then he's going to die. Fast forward 2 weeks and you do it. That's first degree murder and that's life.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. The trial attracted media attention from around the world and has obtained a level of notoriety due to the numerous depictions of the events in literature and television. The version from Discovery Channel's A Haunting. Arne Johnson and Debbie Glatzel provided first-hand accounts of the versions of events depicted in Discovery Channel's A Haunting episode, Where Demons Dwell, this is the more in-depth version, backstory of the kid's possession. The one that fled the kid and went into Johnson. So during the interview, they claimed to be eyewitnesses to demonic possession and were both adamant in their support for the Warrens' recollection of events. They asserted that paranormal activity began after they went to clean up a rental property that they had just acquired. David recollected that an old man appeared, pushing and terrifying him. The couple initially thought David was using the old man as an excuse to avoid cleaning, but David informed them that the old man had vowed to harm the Glatzels if they moved into the rental home. David's visions of the old man included the man appearing as a demonic beast who muttered Latin and threatened to steal his soul. Although
sure, all right.
as alleged demons do, I suppose. Although the family allegedly heard strange noises coming from the attic, no one but David ever witnessed the old man. After David experienced night terrors, exhibited strange behavior, and obtained unexplained scratches and bruises, the family called upon the services of a Catholic priest who attempted to bless the house. The terrified family concluded that the house was evil and would no longer continue to rent it. David's visions worsened, occurring in the daytime as well. 12 days after the original incident, the family summoned the self-proclaimed demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren to assist. Lorraine allegedly witnessed a black mist materialize next to David, an apparent indication of a malevolent presence. Debbie and her mother told the Warrens that they had seen David being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterwards. David had started to growl, hiss, and speak in otherworldly voices and recite passages from the Bible or Paradise Lost.
The Gladsels recounted how each night a family member would remain awake with David as he suffered through spasms and convulsions. After receiving a prognosis of multiple possessions from the Warrens, David was subjected to 3, quote-unquote, lesser exorcisms. Lorraine asserts that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition, specifically in relation to the murder Johnson would later commit. In October of 1980, the Warrens contacted Brookfield police to warn them that the situation was becoming dangerous. According to eyewitness testimony, Arne Johnson coerced one of the demons purportedly within David to possess him while participating in David's exorcisms. And it's here that A Haunting, the TV show, veers away from the circumstances of Johnson's possession as described by those involved. According to the show, a few days after Johnson egged the demon on during the exorcism, I just like that antagonizing the demon. Come on. Come on. Take me. I dare you.
I heard you wouldn't.
Double dare you. Yeah, heard you wouldn't.
I bet you're one of those lame pocket protector wearing demons. You don't even have any superpowers.
Bet you're the demon of jaywalking. You're not as cool as the demon of rage. After Johnson egged the demon on during the exorcism, he was attacked rather viciously by the demon, which allegedly took control of his car and forced it into a tree. Fortunately, Johnson was unharmed. They always are. After this incident, Johnson returned to the rental property to examine an old well that supposedly housed the demon. In both the dramatized version and his personal account, Johnson recollects that this was his final encounter with the demon while completely lucid, as it was after encountering the demon at the well and making eye contact with it that he became possessed. The Warrens claim to have warned him not to do that, although their warning was not mentioned in the TV show. As David's condition continued to worsen, Debbie and Johnson decided it was time to move out of her mother's home. Debbie was hired by Alan Bono, a new resident in Brookfield, as a dog groomer. Debbie and Johnson began renting an apartment close to her place of employment. After moving in, Johnson started to exhibit odd behavior that was strikingly similar to David's, causing Debbie to fear that he had become possessed as well. According to Debbie, Johnson would fall into a trance-like state wherein he would growl and hallucinate, but later have no memory of it. So, fast forwarding, on February 16th, 1981, Johnson called in sick to his job at Right Tree Service and joined Debbie at the kennel where she worked, along with his sister Wanda and Debbie's 9-year-old cousin Mary. Bono, the couple's landlord and Debbie's employer at the kennel, bought the group lunch at a local bar and proceeded to drink heavily, as one does.
Right.
For lunch.
Sure.
After lunch and drinking, the group returned to the kennel. Debbie then took the girls to get pizza, but insisted they return quickly, anticipating trouble. When they returned, Bono, intoxicated at this point, classic Bono, became agitated. Everyone left the room at Debbie's urging, except Bono, who seized Mary and refused to let go. Johnson headed back to the apartment and ordered Bono to release Mary. Wanda recounted the following events to the police. Mary ran for the car as Debbie attempted to mitigate the situation by standing between the two men. Wanda tried in vain to pull Johnson away. Johnson, growling like an animal, then drew a 5-inch pocket knife and stabbed Bono repeatedly. Bono died several hours later. According to Johnson's lawyer, Bono had suffered 4 or 5 tremendous wounds, mostly to his chest, and one that stretched from his stomach to the base of his heart. Johnson was discovered 2 miles from the site of the murder and was held at the Bridgeport Correctional Center on bail of $125,000, which actually, fun fact, not so fun fact, was the first ever murder in the city of Brookfield, Connecticut.
Holy shit.
Broke
How
the
old
streak.
was the city of Brookfield, Connecticut, though? Was it founded in 1970 and then this happened in 1981?
That would suck.
We've only been in town for 11 years, you bastards.
Actually, no, founded in 1710.
Oh, holy shit.
Yeah, that was one hell of a streak that got broken.
Yeah.
I bet they were pissed.
Yeah, just, damn it, man. We were so close to getting the non-murderers medal.
We were almost at our tricentennial of no murder. You bastards.
You killed Kenny. You bastard. Anyways. All right, so the day after the murder, Lorraine Warren informed the Brookfield police that Johnson was possessed when the crime was committed. A media blitz soon surrounded the story, fueled in part by the Warrens, whose agents promised that lectures, a book, and even a movie detailing the gruesome case were in the works. Already. Already talking about a movie. Come on,
You
guys.
know, it was the 80s. They'd make a movie out of anything. You wouldn't see that happen
That's
today.
true. They made a
Andy gave me this
horror
look
movie.
like, are you fucking serious?
Yeah, they made a horror movie called Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
That is true. Yeah.
It's not good. It's not good at all. So, Martin Minnella, Johnson's lawyer, received calls from all over the world about what was being called the Demon Murder Trial. Minnella traveled to England to meet with lawyers who had been involved with two similar cases, though neither of those actually went to trial. He planned to fly in exorcism specialists from Europe and threatened to subpoena the priests who oversaw David Glatzel's exorcisms if they did not cooperate with the defense. The trial took place in Connecticut's Superior Court in Danbury, beginning on October 28, 1981. Minnella attempted to submit a plea of not guilty by virtue of possession. I like that sentence, virtue of possession.
Right.
But the presiding judge, Robert Callahan, promptly rejected the defense. Callahan argued that no such defense could ever exist in the court of law due to a lack of evidence and that it would be irrelative and unscientific to allow related testimony. The defense chose to imply that Johnson acted in self-defense. Because of this, the jury was not legally allowed to consider demonic possession as a viable explanation for the murder. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days before convicting Johnson on November 24th, 1981, of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, though he served 5. The incident led to the creation of a made-for-TV movie called The Demon Murder Case on NBC and a major motion picture, the production of which was stalled due to internal conflicts.
Well, you know, now that they're making this Conjuring movie universe thing, I'm sure that we'll see that come to fruition.
In 1983, Gerald Brittle, with the assistance of Lorraine Warren, published a book about the incident entitled The Devil in Connecticut. Lorraine Warren has stated that profits from the book were shared with the family. Sources confirm that $2,000 was paid to the family by the book publisher. Upon the book's republication in 2006 by iUniverse, David Glatzel and his brother, Carl Glatzel Jr., sued the authors and book publishers for violating their right to privacy, libel, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This took a turn. Carl also claimed that the book alleged he committed criminal and abusive acts against his family and others. He said that the possession story was a hoax concocted by Ed and Lorraine Warren to exploit the family and his brother's mental illness, and that the book presented him as the villain because he did not believe in the supernatural claims. He asserted that the Warrens told him that the story would make the family millionaires and would help get Johnson out of jail. According to Carl Glatzel, the publicity generated by the incident forced him to drop out of school and lose friends and business opportunities. He is currently writing a book titled Alone Through the Valley about his version of the events surrounding his brother. Lorraine Warren defends her work with the family. She says that the 6 priests who were involved in the incident agreed at the time that the boy was possessed and that the supernatural events she described were real. Gerald Brittle, author of The Devil in Connecticut, says he wrote the book because the family wanted the story told, that he possesses video of over 100 hours of his interviews with the family, and that they signed off on the book as accurate before it went to print. Glatzel's father, Carl Glatzel Sr., denies telling the author that his son was possessed. Johnson and Debbie, now married, wholeheartedly support the Warrens' account of demonic possession and have stated that the Glatzels in question are suing simply for monetary purposes.
Huh.
Wow.
I think the devil made him do it.
Probably.
That is fair, though. It's very difficult to prove that in a court of law.
That's the problem. That's really the problem.
It's like, all right, well, do you have pictures of the demon entering the man?
It's very difficult to prove anything non-tangible.
Yeah, right.
So,
it is true.
But that's.
But we proved oxygen, so it is possible.
Well, oxygen actually can be measured, though.
Yes. Well, if demons are real, demons can be measured.
That's not.
They're about 3'8".
Weigh about 350.
You guys are killing me.
They're very dense. Yeah, that's what that is.
Very
Yeah.
concentrated.
So,
They
real
look
misty,
there's
but
different
they're-
gravity in hell.
Yeah,
I
is true.
assume.
Yeah, it's very concentrated.
It's like Jupiter. Jupiter's got more gravity than Earth does. I don't see why the same.
Yeah, it's
thing
the same.
can't apply. It is the exact same.
Hey, well, thanks for the story, Mike,
Hey, you're welcome.
and thank you both for being on the show today.
You are
It's
so
been-
welcome.
It's been fun.
You're
It's
welcome.
been a good time. Listeners, you can check us out on the internet. We are on Twitter and Instagram at antifictioncast. You can also email us at antifictioncast@gmail.com. Tell all your friends about us. Check us out on Spotify. Yell at us on the street, whatever. And we'll see you next week for our final episode of
anti-fiction
Spooktober.
ever.
No, just of
Ever in the whole
Spooktober.
world.
Just of the Spooktober series, you guys. I'm gonna keep
Oh,
doing the
okay.
show.
There was a
Yeah,
miscommunication.
yeah. No. Yeah, no. It's gonna keep going. Yeah. But next week will be ghosts
It's like, cool.
again.
We didn't
and
even
it'll
do
be
Music Volume 2 yet.
It'll be a
So,
spoopy. It'll be a spoopy episode.
Spooktacular.
Yeah, Spooktacular Spooktober.
As you can see over here. It's going to get pretty spooky.
We'll see you next week.